They laughed when the screen froze on my face. Not belly laughter, just the thin, civilized kind people do when they're afraid of silence. The boardroom smelled like burnt coffee and bergamot, a row of water glasses reflecting the skyline like polished ice. She stood at the head of the table. Cassandra Vane, my mentor once upon a time, now surgeon-in-chief, hands folded, mouth arranged into sympathy she had studied in a mirror. "Effective immediately," she said, and the words clipped off pieces of me as they traveled. "We're restructuring. Thank you for your service, Mara." A camera light blinked red in the corner. Investor relations was capturing artifacts, which is what they called it when they documented executions. The head of HR slid a folder toward me like a meal to a prisoner. Inside, a separation agreement, a non-compete drawn in barbed wire, and a script of things I would not say. Someone coughed. Someone adjusted a cufflink. The glass wall reflected a second, ghostly boardroom, a parallel world where I didn't look this calm. I did not cry. There are tears, and there is water. Water can cut stone if you let it run long enough. I kept my water. Cassandra tilted her head. "You understand, of course. Performance and culture fit. We need speed. Speed." I had given them speed. I had built the landing pages that converted at 22%, the churn that ticked down quarter over quarter, the mid-market wedge when enterprise pretended not to notice. I had sat in windowless rooms with sales and rewrote decks until the copy sang. I had turned their incoherent product roadmap into a story a CFO could sign. I had held Cassandra's coat while she told the world it was her idea. "May I ask a question for the minute?" I said, "because I am a professional and because minutes become discovery." Cassandra nodded. The camera purred. Which performance metric fell short under my purview? My voice was a neutral hallway. "We beat net revenue retention. CAC LTV improved. Pipeline tied to campaigns closed within forecasted variance. If this is about culture, I'd like it defined." There were looks around the table. HR cleared her throat. "It's holistic. Holistic is what you say when you don't have evidence." I smiled with just my teeth. "Then I'm grateful the termination is not for cause." Cassandra's mouth tightened by the smallest degree. She preferred me brilliant and grateful. She did not prefer me precise. After, in the corridor, the building kept too cold to keep people awake. I carried the folder like a bomb you mustn't jostle. The elevator doors opened with a mirrored shiver. My face looked older by 10 minutes. When they closed, I let the breath go. It fogged the chrome and vanished. Outside, Boston was winter sharp, the river blade flat. I walked until the adrenaline unhooked its claws. On the Longfellow, runners passed with headphones, lives frictionless and fast. I leaned on the rail and opened the folder again, reading like an architect studies a failed beam. The non-compete was ambitious. Legal had gotten drunk on their own italics. 90 miles, 12 months, broad as sky. My severance was generous enough to buy my silence, but not my memory. My phone vibrated. A text from Cassandra, as if we were still friends. "This is for the best. Take time. You're talented. You'll land somewhere smaller that suits you." Smaller. She meant quieter. She meant a place that wouldn't threaten her keynote, the fable she told about herself. I put the folder away and took out my notebook. Paper, not pixels. Pens don't crash at exactly the wrong moment. Across the river, the glass towers threw back the last daylight, mirror to mirror to mirror, and I began to write what I remembered. Dates, deals, who had promised what and delivered nothing, which vendor we strangled on net 60 while we bragged about empathy on stage. The night Cassandra asked me to ghostwrite an email to the board and then pretended she had written it on the plane. The customer we lowballed and the one we lost, because she needed the optics of a principled stand. The clause I had fought for in the channel agreements, the one legal called fussy until it saved our quarter, the Slack messages, the after-hours edits, the original sin, what we had told the street that was, at best, aspirational. I was not building a lawsuit. I was building a map. In the steel reflection of the water, the city looked like something under glass, precious, curated, untouchable. People think demolitions are loud. They are not. The loud part is a myth. The real work is measured. Permits, math, the slow removal of a load-bearing lie. You watch where the dust will go. You choose who gets to breathe. By the time the first drops of rain began to stipple the notebook, I had my first 3 names, my first 2 dates, my first quiet favor to call in. I closed the cover. The river kept moving. So would I. The morning after the firing felt like the day after surgery. pain dulled by anesthesia, but the outline of loss unmistakable. My apartment was still half-lit from the city outside, soft amber spilling through the blinds. I made coffee strong enough to dissolve guilt and opened my laptop. The inbox was already a battlefield. Corporate condolences from colleagues who'd stayed silent in the room, recruiters circling like crows, and a single unread message from Nicole Carter, employment lawyer, subject line, "You'll want to get ahead of this." Nicole and I had met once at a panel about non-competes. She'd said something I never forgot. Every clause is a story about who had power at the time it was written. I replied to her email with one sentence: I need to rebalance the story. By noon, we were sitting in a cafe with cracked tile floors and a view of the Charles. Nicole wore confidence like armor. Clean white shirt, watch precise to the minute. "They'll expect you to go quiet," she said, sliding a legal pad toward me. "We won't give them that." She drew columns: assets, threats, leverage, the architecture of war in pen and ink. Under assets, we listed reputation, client trust, data on campaign performance. Under threats, NDA, non-compete radius, Cassandra's network. Under leverage, proof of misrepresentation to the board, and relationships with key accounts. "Remember," Nicole said, "leverage isn't revenge, it's negotiation." "Same tools," I murmured. "Different intent." We spent hours dissecting clauses. My severance package gave them a 12-month silence, but it didn't muzzle truth if the company itself breached ethics first. There were gaps wide enough to drive a semi through, phrasing like, "in the ordinary course of business and materially detrimental." I circled every ambiguity like a future exit sign. When we were done, Nicole looked satisfied. "You're free to have conversations. Just don't solicit. Listen." She smiled. "People talk when they think you're finished." Outside, the air smelled of thawing snow and possibility. I walked past the company's tower, 40 floors of tinted glass, my reflection ghosting upward like smoke. The digital marquee still played Cassandra's quote from last quarter: "Leadership is velocity." The irony was exquisite. That evening, I opened LinkedIn for the first time in months. The feed was an altar to performative optimism. Promotions, product launches, gratitude posts. I typed carefully. Transitions aren't endings, they're architectural revisions. Grateful for the foundation, excited for what's next. It wasn't a cry for help, it was bait. Within an hour, DMs began arriving. Vendors, investors, even competitors offering coffee chats. I didn't reply yet. Every message was a door. I wanted to know which one opened toward Cassandra's empire. At midnight, I built a spreadsheet. Each tab a new corridor. Who owed me favors, who'd whispered discontent, who'd left quietly in the last year. Some names glowed like live wires, product leads she'd alienated, marketing partners burned by her arrogance, people with data, memory, resentment. As I logged the last entry, rain rattled the windows. I stared at the grid of names, colors, notes, and felt the strange calm of someone mapping a demolition plan. Each formula, each cross-reference, was a charge placed delicately under a structural beam. I wasn't out to explode her world. I wanted to remove its supports, one calculated inch at a time. I closed the laptop. The city outside looked like circuitry, each light a pulse in the network I once powered. Somewhere out there, Cassandra slept, dreaming she'd ended me. She'd forgotten. I built her story once, pixel by pixel. Now I would write the next one. If you're following this story, stay with me. The next move isn't loud. It's surgical. Revenge doesn't begin with rage. It begins with scheduling. I spent the next week booking coffees with ghosts, former colleagues who'd resigned without farewell emails, vendors whose contracts expired, investors who had once circled and then mysteriously backed out. Boston was still cold enough to keep secrets. Steam rose from grates, and conversations carried softly in cafes where loyalty had a half-life. The first ghost was Anika, our ex-analytics director. She looked different, lighter, freer, but her eyes sharpened when I mentioned Cassandra's name. "You got the boardroom treatment," she said, stirring her espresso. "Classic vein, public grace, private knife." She said I wasn't a culture fit. Annika's laugh was short. Culture is what she kills to keep power. We traded data like contraband. I learned that after I left, Cassandra had reassigned my team under a VP imported from a competitor. The result: chaos. Campaigns derailed, renewal rates dropped, and 2 enterprise clients were reconsidering contracts. "Who?" I asked. Annika smiled. You didn't hear it from me. By the time we stood to leave, I had more than gossip. I had coordinates. But the next meeting was with Leo, a vendor rep who'd been cut during Cassandra's efficiency initiative. We met in a co-working space that smelled faintly of ambition and burned coffee. Leo slid his phone across the table, a quiet rebellion. On screen, forwarded emails between Cassandra and procurement, proof that she'd strong-armed smaller partners into temporary discounts that never ended. Why show me this? I asked. Because you were the only one who paid invoices on time. Simple, human, damning. And I kept moving. Coffee shops, hotel lobbies, a corner seat at the library where the Wi-Fi never faltered. Every conversation was a brushstroke in the same portrait. Cassandra building her myth while draining everyone else dry. I carried a leather notebook now. Old habit turned ritual. Inside, pages filled with handwriting small and neat. Dates cross-referenced with account numbers. Nicole called each night to remind me. Document intent, not accusation. Her tone was steady, but I could hear the thrill underneath. Lawyers pretend to dislike drama, but they feed on structure. Some nights, exhaustion blurred into satisfaction. I'd close the notebook, trace the edge of the cover, and imagine the eventual symmetry. The moment when Cassandra would stand where I had stood, blinds half drawn, eyes reflecting her own undoing. The midweek, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. Marcus.dentonahelixgroup.io. The subject line was a single question. Lunch? Helix Group. Cassandra's fiercest rival. A company she once called architecturally incoherent during a panel. I remembered her smile as she said it, a blade wrapped in silk. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I opened a browser tab and searched Helix Revenue Q2, then Helix Board Composition. Their numbers were climbing, quietly, methodically. If Cassandra was the empire, Helix was the insurgency. Nicole's voice echoed in my head. Leverage isn't revenge, but sometimes leverage feels like justice warming in your chest. That night, I went walking along the waterfront. The wind off the harbor tasted metallic, like anticipation. Lights reflected in the glass towers, her tower among them, high floors still burning past midnight. She'd always said real leaders never sleep. She'd be right about that at least. I opened my phone and drafted a reply. Marcus, lunch sounds interesting. Friday noon, your pick. M. I didn't hit send yet. I watched the cursor blink, a pulse like my own heartbeat. This wasn't about getting even anymore. It was about reclaiming narrative, word by word, meeting by meeting. The ghosts I'd summoned had begun whispering back, and their stories all pointed toward the same truth. Cassandra had built her kingdom on borrowed blueprints. I saved the draft, slipped my phone into my coat, and started walking home. Every step felt measured, like the ticking of a countdown I had finally learned to control. By the time I reached my building, I knew I would send that email. But not tonight. Tonight was for silence, the kind that builds pressure before precision release. If you've ever rebuilt yourself from someone else's rubble, you know this quiet. Stay with me. The first real crack is coming. The email was sent at 7:02 a.m. Friday. Not from my main address. That one was compromised with corporate ghosts. But from a new domain I'd registered 2 nights earlier. A clean slate, professional but untraceable to the old company. The kind of digital rebirth that leaves no forwarding address. Marcus Denton replied within 10 minutes. Blue Glass Cafe, Seaport District. Noon. Direct, confident. The tone of someone who already knows he's the one being courted. I liked that. Power that doesn't beg for recognition has always interested me. I spent the morning rereading notes from my ghost meetings. Annika, Leo, the vendors, the friction points Cassandra created just by needing to be the smartest in the room. Every empire dies the same way, from the weight of its own story. My job was to speed up gravity. The cafe was all glass and steel and self-awareness. Baristas with immaculate beards poured latte art shaped like hearts they didn't believe in. Marcus was already seated in the back, his suit the color of midnight, and a half smile like he knew this wasn't a social call. Mara Chen, he said, rising to shake my hand. You've had quite a quarter. I like to stay busy. He studied me a beat too long. You didn't come here for sympathy. No, I came because I know how Cassandra Vane thinks, and because I know where her weak beams are. He didn't flinch. Go on. I told him about her obsession with velocity, the shortcuts disguised as innovation, the client accounts on the verge of churn. I didn't name names, didn't hand over files. I just drew the outline of a problem his company could solve, if they had the right partner. "And you," he said, leaning back. "Want to be that partner? I want to build something that lasts after her glass tower falls." He smiled like an investor who'd just heard the elevator pitch of the decade. "We've been watching your work for years. Cassandra's good at claiming credit, but numbers leave fingerprints. You have a reputation for precision." Precision. The word hummed through me like current. Marcus lowered his voice. "If we moved forward, there'd be optics to manage. She'd scream conflict of interest, breach of contract." "She'd be right," I said, "but I've already mapped the legal terrain. My non-compete is porous. If I build a new strategy, not a direct product, we're clean." He nodded slowly. Respect replacing caution. "Then build me a plan. 2 weeks. Show me how to take her accounts without taking her baggage." I shook his hand. The deal wasn't real yet, but momentum was. And that afternoon, I met Nicole at her office. She read my notes, face blank as courtroom marble. "You're dancing close to the line," she said finally. "I know. Just make sure the floor beneath you isn't hers." She drafted a memo of protections, language that insulated me if Cassandra tried to frame the meeting as solicitation. "Think of it as emotional Kevlar," she said, sliding the paper across her desk. Outside, the city had turned the color of wet slate. I walked past our old headquarters, its mirrored walls throwing my reflection back at me again and again, infinite versions of the woman she thought she'd erased. In one of those reflections, I smiled. Maban, well, by Sunday, I was sketching again. Not marketing plans, architectural layouts. It was how I thought through strategy. Lines, weight, structure. The blueprint of a building is also the blueprint of a campaign. Both depend on what holds and what breaks. Cassandra had taught me that. Without realizing, she'd also taught me how to dismantle her. I drew 3 pillars: insight, influence, integrity. The last word made me pause. I wasn't naive enough to believe revenge and integrity could coexist, but maybe truth could. Truth built cleaner foundations. At midnight, I emailed Marcus a draft proposal titled Project Mirrorfall. Subject line, for review, proof of concept. I didn't expect a reply until Monday. It came 12 minutes later. "This is extraordinary. Let's make history." For a moment I just stared at the words, the quiet promise in them. Cassandra had always said legacy was written by survivors. Maybe so. I closed the laptop, the city lights pulsing against my window like a heartbeat. Every controlled demolition begins with the first detonator. If you're still here, lean in. The next charge is already wired. The air in the Seaport Tower tasted like recycled confidence and cold espresso. 2 weeks after that first meeting, I was back across from Marcus Denton, this time not as a curiosity, but as an architect with blueprints. My slides glowed on the screen between us, each line and ratio designed to speak in the only language executives trust: risk mitigation, disguised as innovation. Project Mirrorfall, I began, my voice steady. A surgical pivot, not a war. You don't destroy Cassandra's company. You absorb what she refuses to evolve. The table was crowded. CFO, CMO, legal counsel, and a few silent assistants who typed without blinking. Marcus watched like a chess player memorizing openings. I walked them through every fracture in her empire: the overextended marketing budget, the decaying customer success model, the dependency on a single vanity metric she paraded in every investor call. I didn't slander her. I didn't need to. Facts are sharper than insults when delivered with composure. When I finished, silence settled. Then the CFO cleared his throat. "You're suggesting we replicate her pipeline? I'm suggesting you build something sustainable while she's busy defending smoke." Marcus leaned forward. "And you'd lead this?" "I'd build the structure. You'll need someone to run it. Someone who hasn't spent years being erased." A slow grin. "You realize this puts you squarely against your old employer." I stopped being their employee the moment they decided humiliation was a management style. He looked at legal. "Any issues?" "Not if she sticks to advisory capacity until the non-compete lapses." Marcus extended his hand. "Then let's get to work." His grip was firm, dry, final. That was the moment the story forked. The precise second when revenge shifted from idea to implementation. And by the time I left the building, dusk had folded itself around the city. The harbor shimmered like molten glass. I stood there watching reflections fracture and reform, every ripple a reminder that stillness is just motion slowed down. Nicole called while I walked. "You did it?" "Verbally, yes. Written contracts next week. You understand what happens now?" "I do. You'll be a target. I already am. She was quiet for a beat. Just remember, revenge isn't a destination. It's an interim report. I smiled. Then let's make it read beautifully. So now that night, I couldn't sleep. The glow of my laptop painted the apartment in blues and whites as I built the project skeleton. Folder after folder. Competitive analysis, account segmentation, brand repositioning. I titled one file, Structural Weakness, Confidential. Inside, I documented every pattern Cassandra had refused to see. Her favoritism for flattery, her allergy to dissent, her need to win publicly even at private cost. I wasn't planning sabotage. I was designing inevitability. Around 3 a.m., and I scrolled through old photos from company events. Cassandra and I shoulder to shoulder, smiling like sisters in a corporate fairy tale. I deleted each one, a tiny exorcism. Not at sunrise. The city was pale and waiting. I drafted an email to my network. Gentle, strategic, calculated. Thrilled to announce my collaboration with Helix Group on a growth strategy initiative. Excited for what's ahead. No bitterness, no references to betrayal. Just clean ambition. People love a comeback story when you don't call it revenge. By noon, notifications flooded in. Congratulations, job offers, curious DMs. I ignored most of them, except one. From Cassandra. Congratulations, Mara. Impressive move. Remember, imitation is still flattery. No punctuation at the end. Her signature tell. The power of unfinished thought. I typed back. Of course. Some blueprints are worth improving. I didn't send it. Instead, I closed the message, poured black coffee, and opened a fresh document labeled Phase 2, Containment. The detonators were live now. All that remained was timing. Outside, the wind rose off the water and pressed against my windows, like the city itself whispering. Careful precision cuts both ways. But precision was the only thing I had ever trusted. The fuse is burning now. Quiet, steady. The collapse won't be noise. It'll be mathematics. The first warning came disguised as courtesy. A LinkedIn notification. You've been mentioned in a post. I clicked. Cassandra's smiling face filled the screen, framed by the same sterile lighting of the boardroom where she'd cut me loose. Change is never easy, but it reveals who's built for endurance. Proud of my team for rising above distractions and staying focused on excellence. Distractions. The word landed like a dart. The comments were a parade of sycophants, people I'd trained, congratulating her on grace under pressure. She'd learned the art of framing, make the opponent look hysterical before they even speak. Nicole called minutes later. She's launching a preemptive smear. Classic move. Expect background calls. Headhunters, vendors, maybe journalists. She wants to define me before I define myself. Exactly. So we move first. That afternoon, I booked a meeting with Helix's communications director, a woman named Tessa Grant, who'd built brands by predicting fire and naming it light. Her office overlooked the harbor. Even her succulents looked expensive. We need a narrative, I told her. Not revenge, not poaching. Vision. Tessa smiled like someone who's seen this movie before. You're Cassandra's ghost story. That's leverage. I'd prefer blueprint to ghost. Then we'll build the scaffolding of inevitability. She proposed a soft campaign. Industry panels, thought leadership articles, podcasts about female resilience and leadership transitions. The kind of slow-burn PR that rewires perception molecule by molecule. I'd become a symbol before Cassandra realized she'd written me one. As by Wednesday, my inbox confirmed the smear. Anonymous tips to journalists claiming I'd violated NDAs. Whispers about ethics investigations. Sloppy work. Too many identical phrases. I traced the language back to a PR subcontractor Cassandra used. Amateur mistake. I sent Nicole the screenshots. Defamation. If we need it. Her reply. Save it. Let her think you're busy surviving. Not planning. That night, I met Marcus at a rooftop bar, the skyline glittering like circuitry. He handed me a mock-up of Helix's upcoming campaign launch. Your fingerprints are already here, he said. Cassandra will choke on this. I studied the design. Crisp, minimal, confident. It's not about choking, I said. It's about watching her realize she built the wrong building. Marcus laughed softly. Remind me never to be on your bad side. You'd have to betray me first. He raised his glass. To controlled demolitions. I touched mine to his. And clean rebuilds. Ascend, and back home, the night felt electric. The air buzzed with the hum of ambition and the faint terror of what comes next. Cassandra's post had spread across industry feeds, her followers echoing her tone, not realizing they were amplifying her insecurity. I began crafting a response, not public, but strategic. A private newsletter to the network that mattered, former clients, partners, investors, exciting developments ahead at Helix Group, building frameworks that value integrity and transparency, thrilled to collaborate with teams who believe leadership means accountability. No names, no venom, just implication sharpened into elegance. By morning, Cassandra's post had been buried under mine, algorithmically and metaphorically. Her distraction had become my stage. Nicole texted at noon. Legal called. She's hinting at an injunction to freeze your advisory work. I typed back. Then she's scared. Fear makes people unpredictable, she warned. Stay measured, always measured. I closed my laptop and looked out at the skyline, the towers gleaming like polished arrogance. Somewhere in that glass, Cassandra was pacing, calling lawyers, composing another post about courage. She thought this was about reputation. She still didn't understand. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I was removing her foundation one support at a time. The storm would come quietly, with documentation and signatures, not shouting. Revenge dressed in professionalism always wins, because no one recognizes it until the papers are filed. I leaned against the window, my reflection overlaying the city like a ghost blueprint. The air smelled of rain and endings. Every countermeasure she launches will circle back. Keep watching. The next precision strike won't come from anger, but from evidence. Deadlines, meetings, signatures, each one a screw turning deeper into the structure I was building beneath Cassandra's glass tower. The noise around me grew louder. Rumors, speculation, anonymous sources claiming I'd been blacklisted. It all sounded like feedback before clarity. Once you adjust the dial, the signal always comes through. Helix had given me a corner office with too much light. The walls were still bare, except for a whiteboard where I drew columns of metrics and a line that ran diagonally down the middle, Cassandra's market share eroding by quarter. Marcus walked in mid-morning, holding 2 coffees and the hint of triumph. She's wobbling, he said, dropping a report on my desk. Lost another enterprise client yesterday. They cited strategic misalignment. Translation, they saw our beta demo. I flipped through the pages, heart steady, professional. I wouldn't celebrate until the structure fully shifted. Cassandra had always been dangerous precisely because she didn't know when she'd lost. She's calling around, Marcus continued, trying to lure back staff who left with you. Let her try, I said. They know where stability lives now. He grinned. You talk like an engineer, not a marketer. I build systems, I said. Stories are just how I explain them. Darinatannim. After he left, I opened the internal dashboard and studied Helix's engagement curves. Growth was steady, clean and predictable, but it needed teeth. I drafted a proposal for a partnership Cassandra could never have landed, a co-branded initiative with NovaQuant, an analytics firm she'd once insulted publicly on stage. I still remembered the look on their CEO's face that day, humiliation laced with promise. I emailed him. Subject line, old bridges, new architecture. His reply came within an hour. I've been waiting for this. By afternoon, we had a signed memorandum. I felt the air shift, the invisible pressure before a building gives. Cassandra's empire relied on appearance, not adhesion. Once a few beams came loose, the facade would fold itself politely to the ground. Nicole called that evening. The injunction threat died. Her lawyers withdrew. Why? She realized discovery works both ways. You have documentation she doesn't want aired. I smiled. So she's negotiating by silence. For now, Nicole said, but keep your armor polished. At home, the city pulsed outside my window, cranes slicing through fog like patient predators. I sat at my desk surrounded by open notebooks. Every detail mattered now. What I said publicly, who I CC'd, the order of my meetings. Precision wasn't just style, it was survival. I drafted a speaking proposal for an upcoming tech summit. Ethics in acceleration, building sustainable growth without collateral damage. A deliberate title, neutral, yet aimed like a laser. Within 2 days, the organizers confirmed my slot. Cassandra had been the keynote in previous years. This time, I'd be the ghost in her audience. The Friday morning, Helix's internal Slack lit up. Someone had leaked Cassandra's internal memo to employees. an email describing me as a regrettable experiment in misplaced trust. The leak made its way to an industry blog within hours, accompanied by a side-by-side graph of our rising numbers and her decline. Marcus forwarded it to me with a single line. You didn't have to lift a finger, but I had. Every bolt I'd tightened, every conversation I'd staged, had made this inevitable. She was unraveling because she couldn't see the invisible architecture of consequence. I stared at the monitor until the lines blurred. My reflection split between screens, one version of me planning, another watching. I felt no joy, no vindication, only the strange calm of an engineer hearing the first controlled creak before collapse. Outside, the harbor lights flickered like pulse beats. I whispered the reminder Nicole had once given me. Revenge isn't a destination. It's an interim report. I wasn't done writing it yet. Next, the structure tilts. Pressure will reveal which beams still hold. Stay with me. The math is about to turn emotional. The summons arrived on a Wednesday, printed on heavy paper that smelled of toner and arrogance. Preliminary injunction. Alleged breach of post-employment confidentiality. Cassandra had decided to pull the trigger after all. The envelope lay on my desk like a live charge, its weight disproportionate to the words inside. Nicole read the filing over speakerphone. Voice clipped. She's claiming you disclosed proprietary data to Helix. Campaign frameworks, customer lists, the works. It's a scare tactic, but she filed it in federal court. Optics over outcome. Will it hold? No, but it's meant to stall. Freeze your deal flow. Make you radioactive. Exactly what she'd done to half the people who'd ever crossed her. Cassandra didn't fight to win. She fought to exhaust. Chuni, kan by noon, Helix Legal was in my office. Their general counsel, Alan, looked like every lawyer I'd ever met. Expensive glasses, careful vowels. We're confident this dies in discovery, he said. But Marcus will have to pause the Nova Quant partnership until it's cleared. Pause. The word landed like a verdict. The deal that could anchor our growth. The piece that made everything irreversible. Suspended in procedural limbo. When they left, the silence was surgical. I stared at the city from my window, each tower glinting like a lie that had learned to shine. For the first time in months, doubt scraped the inside of my ribs. Had I miscalculated? Was I still building, or had I simply detonated myself? And that night, I walked through the rain with my coat unbuttoned, the city's lights smearing across puddles. I ended up at Emily's bar, the same friend who'd once told me revenge feels righteous until it's all you have left. She was wiping down the counter when she saw me. Mara, she said softly, you look like someone who's been served. News travels fast. Cassandra called me. Of course she had. What did she say? That you're self-destructing. That she tried to save you. I laughed once, sharp enough to hurt. Classic Cassandra. Rewrite the script before the audience catches up. Emily poured whiskey into a heavy glass. You sure this fight still serves you? I didn't start a fight. I started an audit. Same blood, different name. She didn't press further. We sat in the hum of neon and low music, two ghosts with too much history between them. But the next morning, my phone was a graveyard of missed calls. Marcus, Nicole, even Alan. The injunction hearing had been expedited, 48 hours. Cassandra wanted the spectacle before the weekend news cycle. In the courtroom, her lawyers wore confidence like cologne. Mine wore exhaustion and quiet fury. Cassandra sat 2 rows ahead, immaculate as ever. She didn't look back, but I could feel the precision of her performance, the stillness of a woman certain she'd choreographed every breath. Nicole whispered, "Stay composed. Judges smell panic." When it was our turn, I let Nicole speak. Facts, not emotion. No proprietary data transferred, no breach of confidentiality. Just general strategy built from experience and public knowledge. Cassandra's attorney objected, of course. They traded Latin terms like ammunition. At one point, the judge interrupted. "Ms. Chen," he said, eyes on me. "Do you believe this filing was made in good faith?" I met his gaze. "I believe it was made in habit, Your Honor." A ripple of laughter in the gallery. Cassandra's jaw flexed. We won the hearing. The injunction dissolved like sugar in rainwater, yet victory tasted hollow. The court transcript would show her desperation. Yes, but the pause had already done its work. Investors hesitated. Deals cooled. The world loves drama more than proof. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, laptop open to a blank document titled Post-Mortem. For the first time, the word didn't mean aftermath. It meant me, alive, dissecting my own choices. Had I become the architect or the ruin? The difference, I realized, was only visible from above. At 2 a.m., an email arrived from a private address. "We need to talk. Alone. There's something you should see." It was signed Annika. The subject line read, "Proof she lied to the board." My pulse steadied. Not racing, not panicking. Steady, like recognition. The story wasn't over. The structure hadn't collapsed. It had just tilted, exposing the hidden beam I hadn't known existed. You can hear it too, can't you? The silence before the next break. Hold your breath. The beam is about to crack. Annika's message contained a single encrypted file and one line of text. "You didn't lose." She overplayed. It was 3 a.m. Rain stitched the windows, steady as a metronome. I opened the file with the same care you use to cut into glass. Inside were 6 forwarded emails between Cassandra and a board liaison named Richard Fielding, dated just 2 weeks before my termination. Subject lines that glowed like confession. Adjusted revenue forecasts, narrative reconciliation, non-disclosed campaign attribution. It took me minutes to understand and seconds to rage. She had doctored metrics, smoothed numbers, shifted reporting windows to secure investor bonuses. The emails were subtle, elegant even, but the deception was unmistakable. And worse, the board had known. They'd sanctioned my firing to bury the evidence before audit season. I called Nicole before dawn. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're not calling at 4 because you did something illegal." "Not yet," I said, forwarding the files. But I think she did. There was a pause long enough to feel like prayer. Then, quietly, "Mara, this isn't leverage. This is dynamite." Atatin name. By 7 a.m., Nicole was in my kitchen wearing jeans and a blazer, her hair damp from the rain. She spread the printouts across my table. "These are internal communications between officers of a public company. If we verify them, it's securities fraud. Annika says they came from the internal archive before she left. That's still a potential felony for her. We tread carefully." She began marking sections with a red pen, muttering like a surgeon cataloging organs. "This email? Look at the timestamp. It predates the earnings call. That means they falsified guidance." I poured coffee, hand steady now. "What does this buy us?" Nicole looked up. "It buys you truth. And Cassandra, a subpoena." We spent the day building a timeline. False reporting, internal approvals, my firing as cover. Each connection clicked into place like the alignment of structural steel. The architecture of deceit was complete, and it was beautiful in the way only engineered collapses are. By evening, Nicole had drafted a memorandum to the SEC's whistleblower office, anonymized but traceable enough to protect me if the story surfaced. "You're not doing this for revenge anymore," she said, scanning for typos. "No," I said. "I'm doing it for record." "Mai?" And Marcus called while we were still working. "The injunction fallout spooked our investors," he said. "I'm fighting to keep the NovaQuant deal alive. I can fix that," I told him. "But I'll need to move first." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done reacting." I didn't elaborate. He didn't ask. Some instincts recognize war without the headline. Amui. When that night, I took a cab to Cambridge, to a quiet bar where board members were known to drink when they wanted privacy. I didn't expect Cassandra to be there, but she was, alone, half hidden by her own reflection in the window. She looked up as I approached. "You should stop following me, Mara." "I'm not following. I'm observing the debris field." She exhaled through her nose, tired, irritated. "You really think you've won something? All you've done is make yourself unhireable." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I won't be indicted." Her glass stopped halfway to her mouth. A perfect, frozen second. "What did you say?" "You heard me." I didn't show her the emails. I didn't have to. Fear rewrote her pupils. She masked it quickly, but not before I saw the calculation flicker behind her eyes. Risk assessment, probability, damage control. "Walk away," she said. "I tried that. You called the lawyers." I left her sitting there, the city lights cutting her reflection in half. Outside, the air smelled like ozone, sharp and clean. I'm back in my apartment. I sent Marcus a short message. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't cancel NovaQuant. I'm bringing leverage." Then I sent Nicole one last email. "File the memorandum. Name me as source. Let the math fall where it will." For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not triumph, not relief, just equilibrium. The quiet satisfaction of equations balanced. The hidden beam was never Cassandra's lies, or the board's complicity. It was me, the load she underestimated, the structure she thought ornamental. Now, I was bearing weight. Precision isn't loud. It's just final. Stay with me. The controlled collapse begins at dawn. The morning smelled of metal and thunder. Boston was heavy with rain clouds, the kind that swallow sound. I arrived at Helix before sunrise, coffee in one hand, a folder of printed evidence in the other. Marcus was already waiting in the conference room, tie loosened, laptop glowing with anticipation. "You said you had leverage," he began. I placed the folder on the table. "This is more than leverage. It's structural failure." He flipped through the first few pages, eyes widening as the context registered. "These are internal communications. From Cassandra and a board member, revenue falsification, timeline manipulation, and the email trail to prove it. They fired me to bury it." Marcus leaned back, silent. The only sound was the rain tapping against the glass. "If this is true, the SEC will shred them." "It's true," I said, "and already in motion. Nicole filed the memorandum last night, but we can control the narrative before it leaks." He looked at me carefully. "You want Helix to go public?" "No," I said. "I want us to look principled when it becomes public. Let Cassandra's empire implode under its own vanity while we position ourselves as the stable alternative." His expression shifted. Admiration edged with unease. "You really built the demolition plan, didn't you?" "I just removed the faulty beams." And by mid-morning, Nicole joined via video call, her voice crisp as glass. "They'll try to settle," she predicted. "Internal audit, quiet resignations, maybe a sacrificial VP. Cassandra will deny involvement." "She can't," I said. "Her name's in the metadata." Nicole smiled, a small flash of satisfaction. "Then all that's left is timing. Let the report surface first. Then release your thought piece about transparency and leadership transitions. Make it sound prophetic." The plan was surgical, not exposure for spectacle, but precision sequencing. The world would connect the dots without us saying a word. At noon, the rain broke. I stood by the window watching the clouds shred themselves against the skyline. Somewhere downtown, Cassandra was reading an internal memo titled, "Urgent, Audit Committee Convening." I could almost hear the panic traveling through her corridors. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Silence. Then her voice, low and taut. "You think you've won. I didn't realize we were still keeping score. You've ruined people's careers. You've made enemies you can't see." "No," I said softly. "You did that. I just turned the lights on." She inhaled sharply. "You're finished, Mara." "I already was. You fired me, remember?" The line went dead. For a long time, I stared at my reflection in the black screen. There was no exhilaration, no victory pulse, just calm inevitability. By evening, the industry feeds exploded. Anonymous whistleblower exposes data manipulation at Vane Dynamics. The stock dropped 8% in 2 hours. By close of trading, Cassandra had stepped down to pursue new opportunities. Marcus appeared at my doorway with 2 glasses of scotch. "To inevitability," he said. "To accountability," I corrected. We clinked, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself a small, private smile. Not joy, just acknowledgement of symmetry. Then later, alone in my apartment, I opened the window. The air was sharp, wet, electric. Across the river, I could see Vane Dynamics headquarters, lights flickering, a few still burning like stubborn ghosts. Somewhere inside, Cassandra was clearing her desk, rehearsing a statement about growth and resilience. I whispered, "Controlled demolition." The words felt earned. My phone pinged, an email from an industry journalist requesting comment. I typed, "I believe in transparency, structure, and the mathematics of consequence. Beyond that, no comment." Then I shut the laptop, poured a final drink, and watched the city breathe. The collapse wasn't violent. It didn't roar or scream. It folded inward, graceful and quiet. Exactly as planned. The structure has fallen, but stories never end at rubble. Stay close. What rises next will belong entirely to me. 3 months after Cassandra's resignation, the industry still whispered her name like a warning. Vane Dynamics was under investigation, its board scattered, its offices half-lit at night like an abandoned cathedral. The press called it the quietest implosion in corporate history. Quiet because every witness had signed NDAs written by lawyers who now needed their own. I kept silent. Silence had become my language. Helix's quarterly results were released that morning. Record growth, 5 new enterprise accounts, one of them poached directly from Cassandra's former portfolio, the one she'd once called untouchable. I read the announcement on my screen, the black letters gleaming against a white background that looked almost ceremonial. Then came the moment I had been engineering for since that boardroom firing, the signing. The conference room on the 34th floor was all glass and clarity. Outside, the city burned with late summer light, hot and gold. Inside, air conditioning hummed with the precision of good machinery. Marcus stood at the head of the table, NovaQuant's CEO across from him. Between them lay 2 sets of contracts. My contracts. The deal was the largest Helix had ever closed, valued at more than Cassandra's last 3 fiscal years combined. But for me, it wasn't about numbers. It was the geometry of consequence, the line drawn from humiliation to mastery. Marcus gestured toward the papers. "You started this," he said. "You should finish it." I picked up the pen, weight balanced perfectly between fingers. The moment the nib touched the page, I remembered that first firing, Cassandra's voice, the camera's red light, my own breath steady against humiliation. Then I signed. My name curved smoothly, final as architecture. Applause, champagne, cameras, phrases like strategic partnership and visionary alignment. I smiled for the photos, all white teeth and poise, the mask of someone the world thought rebuilt by grace. Inside, it felt quieter than victory, more like stillness after an earthquake, when the dust hasn't yet realized it can fall. Then that evening, I returned to the apartment, still in my black suit. The city outside was violet with dusk. My inbox overflowed, congratulatory emails, requests for interviews, invitations to panels about resilience. I ignored them all except one, from an address I hadn't deleted. Cassandra Vane, Covenant Outlook. Subject. Congratulations, Mara. No punctuation again. Just those 2 words. I hovered over delete, then opened it. They always replace the fallen with the ones who pushed them. That was all. No signature, no threat, just the truth, delivered like a benediction. I typed back, maybe. But some replacements rebuild better foundations. I didn't send it. Some victories only matter if they stay unspoken. Atasaman noosati farananin at midnight. Marcus hosted a celebration on the Helix rooftop. The skyline shimmered, champagne fizzing like electricity. "You've rewritten the narrative," he said, raising his glass. "You're the architect of our future." I looked out over the city, the cranes, the scaffolds, the new towers rising where old ones had crumbled. Boston was always rebuilding itself, layer over layer, like people who refused to stay ruined. "I didn't rewrite it," I said. "I finished it." He didn't understand, but that was fine. This story had never been his to interpret. And later, when the crowd thinned and the night softened, I stood alone at the edge of the roof. The wind tangled my hair, carrying the salt of the harbor. In the distance, Vane Dynamics' logo flickered once, then went dark. A power outage, maybe, or symbolism doing what symbolism does best. I raised my glass to it. "To controlled demolitions," I whispered, "and to clean architecture." Then I drank, watching the reflection of my city ripple across the glass buildings below, each pane catching fragments of light, reforming them into something new, something mine. The house is gone, the tower has fallen, and tomorrow the blueprints begin again. Stay for the final chapter, the reconstruction. The morning after the signing felt strangely weightless. The city outside my window was rinsed clean by rain, the glass towers reflecting a new, impossible brightness. For months I had lived in crisis, every day a calculation, every night a quiet war. Now, silence. No phone vibrating with emergencies, no legal filings, no ghosts left to outthink. I brewed coffee and let the steam drift upward like a small ceremony. For the first time in a year, I didn't reach for my laptop. My body didn't understand the stillness. It kept waiting for impact, for Cassandra's name to light up my screen, for the next move in a game that no longer existed. Freedom, it turns out, is louder than revenge. By noon, I was back at Helix. Not out of habit, but because I wanted to see the building alive. The lobby smelled of stone and ambition, that particular blend of metal, glass, and aftershave that only success can manufacture. On the big digital board, the headline rotated every 30 seconds. Helix Group announces strategic alliance with NovaQuant, positioned as the new industry standard in ethical innovation. Ethical innovation. The phrase had been mine. A quiet jab at Cassandra's empire, disguised as mission statement. The interns didn't know the story behind it. They didn't need to. They just carried the new logo on their badges like a flag of clean beginnings. Marcus caught up to me by the elevators. "They want you to keynote at the Global Futures Summit," he said. Topic: rebuilding trust in leadership. Trust, I repeated, tasting the word. I'll have to remember what that feels like. He laughed, half awkward, half reverent. "You could teach a masterclass on it." "No," I said. "I could teach one on precision." In the weeks that followed, the narrative rewrote itself in real time. Publications ran profiles calling me the architect who outbuilt her betrayer. Panels invited me to discuss corporate resilience. Podcasts quoted my line about mathematics and consequence. Cassandra's name vanished from headlines altogether, replaced by euphemisms like a former executive. She'd disappeared. No public statements, no interviews, just absence. A vacancy shaped like memory. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, but mostly, I felt relief. It's exhausting carrying someone else's downfall. One evening, Nicole and I met for dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the river. She looked different, softer somehow, her phone face down for once. "You realize you changed an industry?" she said over a glass of Pinot. "I didn't change it," I said. "I just reminded it that architecture applies to systems, not just buildings. Every structure has a stress point. You either design for it, or you collapse under it." She smiled, the kind of smile lawyers reserve for clients who've survived. "So what's next? A book deal? A foundation?" "Neither," I said. "I'm going back to building, but smaller this time. Fewer meetings, more meaning." And that night, I walked home through Back Bay, past the construction site where my firm's new office would rise. The foundation had just been poured, smooth and clean. The air smelled of wet concrete and beginnings. I traced the edge of the site with my hand against the temporary fencing. A worker noticed me lingering and called out, "You the architect?" I nodded. "Something like that." "Well," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans, "you picked a strong foundation." I smiled. "That's the idea." The back in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and stood at the window. The skyline shimmered, Helix's tower, NovaQuant's new office, and in the distance, a dark gap where Vane Dynamics used to glow. The city keeps erasing and redrawing itself, I thought. So do people. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote the first line of my next blueprint. Never build for admiration, build for endurance. Then I closed the cover, turned off the lights, and watched the city breathe. And revenge, I realized, was never the point. Architecture had been. To tear down what was rotten, to rebuild on solid ground, to understand that even collapse can be a kind of creation. Cassandra once told me I was too structural, too methodical, not emotional enough to lead. She was right. I lead with equations now, not apologies. Outside, a crane swung through the night sky, its arm cutting a perfect arc over the river. Controlled, deliberate, patient. That's how you build what lasts. If you've stayed through every fracture and rebuild, you already know. The real masterpiece was never the tower, but the woman who learned how to stand on her own foundation.